left, right.
Yo, thank you for joining this episode. This episode is about mental health. This is a serious episode. We try our best to make light of it and to be as educational as possible. If you're feeling depressed, you may want to consider professional help before listening to this episode. But we do try our best to share from our experiences. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to this podcast. We greatly appreciate it. It helps us grow. And as always, thank you guys for listening. I'll see you guys on the other end. This is SipTalk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Of course, let's go.
Cheers.
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 Yo, what is up? Hello,
Yo.
everybody. My name is Justin DiGiulio out of my basement, New Jersey, joined by James, the Boswell, philosopher, counter, bartender, referee. He's got them all the designations. This is SipTalk, episode
Philosopher and a counter.
episode 153. Today we're talking about mental health. We'll be drinking while we do so because this is SipTalk, where we drink and we talk. So to get started, before we get into mental health, we're still talking about cryptocurrency. We're going to try to skip through that. What are you drinking down there in sunny South Carolina?
Changing it up and going back to box wine. For some reason, I'm cold right now, so I didn't feel like drinking a cold beer.
Well, you could have drinking a warm beer.
Yeah, but then I would have had to plan ahead.
So I got this. I was going to try to take it light today, but I was going through the cellar here trying to find something to drink, and I couldn't find a good whiskey. So I found this bottle of Belvedere Vodka. Now it says Belvedere Vodka. It's in gold. Now I had the same bottle, and it's got a silver label on it, but this is Belvedere Vodka, unfiltered, rare diamond rye. So now I actually don't realize, if I bought a vodka or if I bought a whiskey. So, I mean, and since it's got the gold instead of the silver, we're just going to open it up and find out what's inside. This is kind of exciting for me. And you're drinking what type of box wine down there?
Boda Box Red Volution, just a red blend.
Okay.
And that's almost certainly going to be vodka.
Yeah, it's definitely vodka. It says both vodka and rye on the.
Well, rye is just whatever grain it was made from. But I think when it comes to spending money on liquor, spending money on expensive vodka is probably the least effective use of your alcohol-based dollars.
I would agree. Vodka's, there's a certain standard I had for vodka, but pretty much anything above that is about the same. So I'll give you the pour here. It says unfiltered, so I'm wondering if it might be a little hazy.
No, nope. Shouldn't be.
No. I'm pouring it into a dirty glass here too. So, for a fact, it's been the glass.
We're using a real scientific way to analyze this.
It's been the glass I've been drinking on it for the last few episodes. I notice when my mental health is poor, I'm a bit messier. I'm actually less OCD. So I've trained my OCD to actually be pretty good on point. I don't take it too crazy. But when I was a kid, it was a bit wild. However, when I'm in a good place and I'm working on like self-development and I'm taking care of myself, my OCD kind of kicks in for the good. So, every decision I make, I kind of stop and say, hey, is this a good decision? Hey, do I want to wake up and get out of bed? Or, hey, do I want to, sleep in a little bit? Or, hey, should I clean up my plate after me, stick it in the dishwasher? Or should I just leave it in the sink? So, my OCD really kicks in. And when my mental health isn't great, I sleep in more. I don't clean up as much. I'm not saying my mental health is bad, but I am drinking out of a dirty glass here in my basement. So, but it's a little weird. And I think mental health being your topic, I'm hoping you got a bit of an earful from me. But I think it's a good topic considering kind of where we stand with coronavirus and children kind of mental development and social development and things like that. So,
well, I'll tell you really quick where the idea came from. Is, well, for one, I kind of want to just talk about this as a current event, not directly related to mental health, but I think it's a fascinating story, and it would be hilarious if it weren't tragic. And that's the school shooting that happened about a week ago in Michigan.
mm-hmm. I know very little about this, but
for possibly the first time ever, the parents of the kid who committed the shooting are also under arrest and are actually in jail right now.
No shit.
Have you heard about this?
No, not at all.
Well, they bought him a gun about a week before he shot people, and in the time between when he was bought the gun and when he shot people, at one point he was in class or whatever, in the school somewhere, and was looking up ammunition, and a teacher caught him. And
okay, hold on. Just pause there. So you're a kid. You got a gun that's given to you. Now, when I was a kid, we had paintball guns, we had BB guns, you had airsoft guns. I had a bow and arrow. We grew up kind of in the country, and we had other kids in our school that had rifles and hunting guns, and and when you're in a community where people hunt and guns are a bit more common, also the South, that would be an interest, almost like a sporting interest. So if your sporting interest was billiards and you were in the library looking up pool cues, I get that. So just with what you've given me so far, no cause for alarm. But
I'd say moderate cause for alarm, and here's why. And take into context, the school that we went to, I don't know the first day of hunting season.
Hold on, hear me out. I don't know the context. And I don't know anything about it. I'm just reacting to the information. The kid was bought a gun, and then he was looking up ammunition online. Maybe he was looking up like how to kill people online. What is a good ammunition? I don't know. I don't know what.
Oh no, it gets worse. But
okay, but back to where we're from.
Just to give people a little bit of background about the type of school that we went to for high school. The first day of hunting season in New York, if I remember correctly, was sometime in like early November. And on that day, probably like 10 to 20% of the kids in the school called out sick.
So they could go hang out in the woods and try to shoot deer.
Yeah. But there's a big difference between hunting rifle ammunition and handgun ammunition. Like, when you go out hunting, you don't bring a pistol. Like, at most, sometimes if you're hunting something dangerous, like I know in the South, feral pigs, we've already talked about this like a year ago, that hunting feral pigs is something that people do. And since those things can actually be really dangerous if they charge at you, then usually what people have is like their hunting rifle and then like a large caliber revolver.
Yeah. That was going to be the case I was going to make for bringing a handgun with you, but that would be the only case.
Right, but even if you're bringing a pistol with you on a hunting trip, you're not bringing like a 9mm semi-automatic handgun, because it's just not the right tool for the job. Like, there's no reason to ever go hunting with like a 9x19 chambered pistol.
Okay, so get back to
the gun he bought was chambered for 9x19, which is the most common round, and it's not used for hunting ever.
Okay,
so that's a red flag there of just like, why are you looking up ammunition in school? And so when the teachers reached out to his parents about it, that the text message that his mother sent back to the kid was, "I'm not mad. You need to learn how to not get caught."
Interesting. But again, I don't. There.
So that incident by itself.
How old's the kid?
I don't know, 16 maybe, 17.
Okay, little young to be having a gun. If I don't know what the age of a gun is, but I can tell you that
18 is the age that you can buy a pistol. In some states, it's 21 for like long rifles.
Well, yeah,
But
and driving.
so his parents
Hold on, hear
bought
me
him the
out.
gun.
And driving in our state was, you couldn't get your permit until you were 16, but we were driving it at 14 and 15 years old, at least in the driveway and kind of off the public roads. So,
Right.
and a vehicle is a deadly weapon, or could be. So,
Okay, so here's where it gets worse.
okay.
Is the day of the shooting, a teacher sees that he has like a drawing or a note on his desk, and it's got a picture of like somebody being shot and saying like the thoughts won't stop, blood everywhere. So the teacher sees this and they call the parents, and they show the parents the note. By the time that the parents got there, like the note had been altered by the kid.
Okay.
But the school recommended that they take him out of school for the day, and the parents refused.
Okay. And it was that day that he shot up the classroom.
Yeah, like 2 hours later. And the parents also like didn't check to see. First of all, they stored the gun in an unsecure location. According to reports, it was in like a bedroom drawer or something, not locked, not secured. So the kid had gone into their room and taken it. If that's even true, if it's possible that like it was even poorly stored than that, but even at their account, it was poorly hidden and not secured, and the kid had taken the gun and brought it to school. So they didn't think to check for where their gun was.
Well, and also, I will say a child under the age of 18 is in the parents' custody. So parents are responsible for their children. That's kind of a fact of life. So, I'll give it to, the state or the school or whoever's prosecuting the parents. That, that is, again, I have mixed feelings, and I'm kind of reacting to this live as you're feeding me the details. But ultimately, children are your responsibility. So there might have been some red flags. There might have been some flags that didn't appear like red flags. But at the end of the day, it's your responsibility.
I mean, from the way that the note was describing, that's about as big a red flag as you can possibly imagine. And the parents refused to take him out of school for the day.
Well, and the school requested that they take him out. So,
this is one where it's hard to find fault with the way that the school handled things.
Yeah. So, but let's get a little more into mental health.
I don't know. I was thinking about that because the news update today, because after the parents were charged and after the warrant was out for their arrest, they disappeared for like 2 days, and they were eventually arrested in like a warehouse in Detroit.
Where was the kid?
Already in jail.
Okay, so the kid was apprehended. And
the kid was already in jail, and then the warrant goes out for the parents' arrest. They go on the run. They eventually are found and arrested. And they each got their own separate lawyer, and they didn't even hire a lawyer for the kid. The state had to appoint a lawyer for the kid.
Wow. All right.
And I'm just thinking, it got me thinking about how we describe gun violence in this country and how often we hear that it's not a gun problem or a violence problem, it's a mental health problem. And then I just started thinking about how we haven't ever talked about mental health on this podcast directly, and how it's a huge issue. And in the last year and a half or so, it's only gotten worse. Coronavirus being a main factor there.
And I'm just going to take a racial stab in the dark at this and say that this kid was white.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, it's you never have the Asian kid like throwing down his calculator and pulling out an Uzi. It's always a white kid shooting at the school. Not always, but as far as I know it to be the case. So and mental health is a really big issue. I'm just kind of drawing attention to the race because it seems to always be white kids and male that are shooting schools. So I don't know what that says, but
I'd be interested to look at the demographics, but that I would certainly agree with you.
Yeah, as far as I know. I don't know what we can pull from that data, but speculative. It appears to be the case. So, look, I want to define mental health real quick, just before we get too deep into this. And mental health being our emotional, psychological, and social well-being.
Yeah, real quick. Lisa and Coco Simpson are both agreeing with me that there are huge red flags, and that the parents completely ignored them.
Yeah, I don't know all the facts. Looking up ammunition, again, I'd need to know more details, what was on the screen, and probably not something that you want to be looking up in school just because it's kind of a contraband item, right? If there's a kid looking up like different liquor or something, that would probably be a red flag also. And so I don't know. So
The kid that's looking up liquor probably isn't shooting up the school though.
well, when it gets to mental health, he might be the depressed kid, and that might be one of the signs. But
Yeah, his aim's not going to be so good though.
Yeah, and we can get into coping mechanisms in in a little bit. So why does mental health matter? And I have it determines how we handle stressful situations, how we make choices, day-to-day choices, and greater life impacting choices, and how we relate to others and how we socialize.
So Elizabeth's pointing out, and I would agree, mental health problems are on our young adults, and I think what she's implying is that it seems to be a bigger problem with young people today.
I do notice that younger people certainly have greater mental health issues than their predecessors. Older people tend to deal better with stress, and I don't know if that's necessarily just because they ignore it more so often, or if they have less of it because they have a different perspective on the world, or they have better coping mechanisms.
My thought is twofold. One is I would ask the question that I can't actually answer, which is, are mental health problems more prevalent today, or are we just doing more to diagnose them, slash have the diagnostic criteria loosened so that more things qualify as mental health? So that's one. And then two is when it comes to younger people versus older people and mental health, is older people were raised during a time when mental health was nowhere near the concern that it is today. So
no conversation about it at all.
right. So you might have plenty of older people that, had they grown up in today's era, would probably be experiencing the exact same thing as the kids today, and they've just spent their entire life dealing with an undiagnosed mental illness and found a way of making it through life on their own, dealing with it. So it could just be that they were socialized to not care about mental health and have just made it this far by coping.
Okay, so you're kind of getting caught up by the comments. We'll address the comments. Want to say hi to Maria. We're recognizing mental health more and more. Schools don't want to do nothing about it. Well, I think some schools do want to do things about it, but kind of schools are maybe not the best equipped to handle mental illness. And then Robin says 66 out of 100 mass school shooters are white shooters, which is way lower than I would have thought.
Yeah, I would have thought it would have been higher too.
Now, I can imagine maybe in some more urban areas where you have kind of a bit more of an eclectic mix of races and ethnicities attending a school, that that might be where some of that
but think about it.
Itself out.
When you hear about a school shooting, how often do you hear about a school shooting at a inner city school? To me, it's almost always suburban or rural schools.
Yeah, I would, as to my knowledge, and I'm speaking of what echoes in my brain through my ear holes, and I listen to a lot of the news. It's often suburban, where you would imagine life would be a lot cushier than in an urban or a rural area. But I have a theory that people who don't have much trauma in their life kind of invent their own trauma because otherwise they just kind of feel like they don't matter or something. I'm not certain the root of it, but I have a theory that people who don't have much drama or trauma invent some of their own. So, that would be people kind of doubling down on whatever's bothering them in the suburbs. My thoughts. What's up, Joe Durio? I guess he must be on Facebook. So I don't see the Facebook feed yet.
Yeah,
Robin.
Robin's doing a good job on the research. I'd like if Robin can research this for us and throw it into the comments. I'd like to know what percentage of like school shootings happen like urban, suburban, rural. What that split would be. See if it confirms our intuition.
So let me talk real quick about some of the mental health issues and disorders. Just I want to run through them so that make sure we're on the same page, and anybody who's listening, we can kind of run them by them as well.
Once you do that, we get some comments talking about parents, and we can talk about parents' role when it comes to their kids' mental health. But you do your thing.
Let me hit these. So first off, I have anxiety disorders. Mental health disorders might include generalized anxiety disorder, social phobias, specific phobias like agoraphobia, claustrophobia, panic disorders, OCD, post-traumatic stress, and then behavior and emotional disorders in children. That can manifest itself in oppositional defiant disorder, ODD.
Yo, that one sucks to deal with. And also, real quick, Ava Marie, we are talking about mental health tonight.
And so children, emotional disorders, behavior emotional, oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Bipolar disorder, formerly known as manic depressive, a person with bipolar experiences episodes of mania, elation, and depression. And then depression is a whole separate disorder. I imagine most people know what depression is, and that can even lead as far as suicidal thoughts to suicide. Dissociation or dissociative disorders, a mental process where a person disconnects from their thoughts, feelings, memories, or sense of identity. Dissociative disorders include dissociative amnesia, depersonalization disorder, and dissociative identity disorder.
Yo, have you ever experienced that? Anything like dissociative?
I don't think so. Every once in a while, I kind of have to ground myself and just make sure that I'm existing in reality, and what's really happening to me is really happening to me.
It's super weird and hard to describe. It's only happened to me once. It was when I was teaching, and I was pretty sick, so I was taking like a lot of cough syrup so that I just wasn't coughing throughout the entire day. It took a little bit too much, and in higher doses, dextromethorphan is a dissociative hallucinogen. And I just remember that, like, I was sitting in a computer lab watching kids, and I'm just like, what am I even doing here? Like,
yeah, I actually, to a bit of that degree, like you just kind of get lost as to like how, like just with reality and how kind of,
yeah, like I had to step outside of the classroom and just kind of look at my surrounding. Like, it's not like I didn't know how I got there or anything else. It was more of an existential, like, what
existential was kind of the word my brain was searching for there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just weird of like, how did I get to this point and that I'm like watching a computer lab of kids do some project or whatever, and like I'm a substitute teacher. It just made me question a whole bunch of things, and thankfully it wore off.
All right, so let me just hit these couple of comments coming in. So yes, parents, we need to help our kids. I think older people ignore it and keep occupied. Keep occupied being a key coping mechanism. Younger people have more free time and tend to dwell. Trust me, I'm a parent. I have an ADD kid.
And also an autism kid, it looks like.
Autism kid. I know a lot about mental health. And then with this case specifically, the parents showed lots of red flags of their own. Local media has stated based on the evidence, the parents had to be charged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you look at the case, you're just like, of course the parents are going to get charged in this one.
Yeah, and again, I don't know, and I also don't trust any media anymore.
No, this is the process. Like, you can watch the press conference that the prosecutor gave and skip the media entirely and just watch what the prosecutor says.
Yeah, well, I think that would be a good way to listen to. All right, next.
I did.
Next mental health issue: eating disorders. anorexia, bulimia nervosa, binge eating. That's not good. And then OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, obsessive recurrent thoughts, images, or impulses that are intrusive and unwanted. Compulsions are time consuming and distressing, repetitive rituals. Treatments include cognitive behavioral therapy and medications. Paranoia. Paranoia is the irrational and persistent feeling that people are out to get you. And it may be a symptom of conditions including paranoid personality disorder, delusional, and schizophrenia.
Have you been around anybody that's paranoid?
Yeah.
Like truly paranoid, not just like in a moment they're saying something that sounds a little loony, but like actual paranoia.
I worked with an agent a long time back, and he had this kind of wacky paranoia, and it had kind of manifest itself in real estate and working with clients, and how every client was going to go behind his back, or the leads that he was getting, he was like trying to search their IP addresses to see if they were real, and it got really weird, but it was definitely a real paranoid personality disorder. I can't expand on it too much here. It was also a while back, and I wasn't kind of noting everything, but it was certainly paranoid.
It's wild to experience when you see it,
but also crippling to the fact where you're not able to get things done. It's debilitating.
I dated a girl who had paranoia, and I remember one time we were walking down the street in Charleston. Just like a Sunday afternoon, we parked and we're walking to a restaurant, right?
Okay, right. Yes.
So, all right. Anyway, yeah, there's people on the street and everyone's just minding their own business. And as we're walking, her and I are talking, and every like 15 or 20 seconds, she's just like, "Did you hear that?" I'm like, "No." "Did you hear that?" "No." I was like, "What is it?" She says, "All these people on the street are like, they're saying things to me." I was like, nobody on the street is paying attention to you any more so than they just need to not like run into you as they pass you by.
Yeah.
And she's like, "No, they're saying all these things to me about something that nobody who didn't like know her deeply personally could ever possibly know." I was like, first of all, nobody's talking about you. Second of all, there's no way that anybody in the street would know what you were mentioning. But to her, it was real.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. All right, let me hit the rest of these. I got three more. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, condition that people can develop as a response to having experienced a traumatic event. Could be a car accident, physical or sexual assault, war-related events, torture, natural disasters, mass death, fires. Psychosis. People affected by psychosis can experience delusions, hallucinations, confused thinking. Psychosis can occur in a number of mental illnesses, including drug-induced psychosis, schizophrenia, and mood disorders.
So drug-induced psychosis is most commonly happening with like methamphetamines.
Yeah, which I see a lot in.
But psychosis is not really like a condition in and of itself. It's more like a symptom that can manifest with other things.
And then schizophrenia, characterized by disruptions to thinking and emotions, disordered perception of reality, hallucinations, delusions, thought disorder, social withdrawal, lack of motivation, impaired thinking. People with schizophrenia have high risk of suicide. Schizophrenia is not a split personality.
Yeah, I don't know where that misconception started, but like if you're schizophrenic, it doesn't mean that you have two different personalities that just kind of like one chooses to manifest or anything else. That's a completely separate disorder and is considerably more rare.
So these are kind of the more serious mental health issues.
Do we hit phobias?
Phobia was kind of under anxiety disorder. And they mentioned agoraphobia and claustrophobia, which, I think agoraphobia is kind of the, described as the fear of kind of the vast openness, but really it means just leaving your house and going outside.
Yeah. Lisa Lisa says, I think a child with obvious mental health instability should never be bought a gun. The text from the mom to the son is haunting. It's really clear from this that they were terrible parents.
Yeah, it sounds like they were pretty bad parents. That's that's what it sounds like. This all stems from, is just them being shit parents.
Because this one, like, there's some school shootings that you look at and you're like, that one would have been kind of hard to prevent. The frustrating thing about this one is how many chances there were to stop this, and how they were basically stopped. The chances, the interventions were stopped by the parents.
Yeah, the school's interventions, the school did what they needed to do. Maybe they could have done more, but at least they did, whatever. And
the question is, what more could the school have done? Because I was talking to someone who was a teacher, and they're like, well, why didn't they search the kid? And I told them that the school called the parents in, and she says, as soon as the parents were called in, like, the school could no longer search the kid. So there might be like some legal things that, like, even if the school wanted to do more, they might have been prevented from doing.
Which is kind of when these legal bullshits backfire.
Mm-hmm.
So look, I don't want to go too much into school shootings. I want to talk about.
I'm just following. I'm just following the thread, and it seems like we're getting more from people talking about school shootings. So I'm kind of going with the people's.
Well, since most of you are unlikely to shoot up schools, let's talk about some mental health ailments that may affect you more so than just students, because.
Well, let me ask you this: what do you think the effect of COVID in the last year and a half has been on mental health?
Oh, funny you ask, because my next sentence was going to be coronavirus and child.
Yeah, I can read your notes from here.
Yeah, can you? It's upside down. I got a lot of them. So first, I also had a note here. I started writing COVID, and then I crossed it out and wrote coronavirus because I refused to. It's just like calling the flu influenza. It's just like you're kind of taking yourself more seriously. I've been running with coronavirus for
way to fight back against the powers.
Yeah, well, there's only so I can keep my mask under my nose, and just cruise through public transit.
That'll show them.
That'll show them, exactly, and call it coronavirus. I got nothing else. I'm not going to push back much more than that. But I think really we haven't begun to see the true effects of coronavirus on mental health, and mental health, when it comes to social interaction, stress handling, and just kind of psychological functioning.
Well, I think it's going to hit different groups differently. Like, if you get adults, they're affected much differently than kids were.
Well, and that's what I'm getting into, is that adults have kind of their behavior mechanics already in place, and life is going to suck, and they'll get depressed, and they'll kind of snap back out of things. Now, as life kind of gets back closer to normal. Now, I was trying to think in our lifetime, while we were maybe in a bit more developmental stage, what kind of trauma on mass scale did we go through? And the closest thing I could think of was 9/11. And can you think of something?
You're making me think of a quote that I saw, which somebody, like, the question was, why is your generation so much more affected by mental illness than our generation? And they say, because we saw 3,000 people die on live television when we were in middle school, and then things only got worse.
Fair enough. And we did literally watch people jumping out of buildings on live TV. That was in school. Yeah, while we were sitting in school, because what else were the news publications going to point their cameras at?
So I think we had like either 8 or 9 periods in the day, and I remember it happened in either second or third period that, like, the news broke, and then for like the remaining 6 or 7 periods of the day, I had one teacher that tried to teach. All the other teachers, like, we're not, whatever the lesson plans were for today, they're thrown out.
So, but the thing about 9/11 is that the world quickly, relative to coronavirus, went back to normal. And, the news coverage didn't talk about 9/11 with the depth they did at first, but with the depth and for the duration that they've been talking about coronavirus. So
it's very difficult to compare the two events because 9/11 was one day and then decades of repercussions.
Sure, but just think about it. Right now, if I turn on the radio and don't want to be thinking about coronavirus, they're never not talking about coronavirus. So
music stations probably don't talk about it.
They do a little bit still. I listen to EQX all the time, and they're still talking about coronavirus. And then, during 3 months after 9/11, there's a really high chance you could turn on the news and they wouldn't be talking about the Twin Towers, right? They were.
I would say the news was pretty constant for probably 4 to 6 weeks, and then it started to drop off because, like, for several weeks, like, they were still conducting rescue operations.
True. So, what I'm getting at is that it went away. You could get away from it more easily. And then, if you want to, the biggest reminder would be when you traveled and then the airports were kind of crazy, right?
Right. I was going to say, when was the last time you flew, and did you have to take your shoes off when you went through security?
No, I got the TSA pre-check, keep my shoes on. But you could get away from it. Coronavirus is a little bit different. It's more difficult to get away from. But we recognize, you and I and people in our age range and older recognize that the world's going to return back to normal or to a level closer to normal.
From COVID?
Yes. But if you're younger, if you're 4 years old or you're 12 years old, 2 years is a lot bigger chunk of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the normal, a year, 8 months into it, 14 months into it, 18 months into it. That's the new normal.
Imagine having 2 years of school where, like, 1 year you're not even in school, and then the next year you're, like, kind of half in school and half not or whatever. How big of an impact is that going to have on you?
Well, that has a huge impact because a lot of it has to do with socialization and how we learn from those around us, from making friends to building relationships, recognizing other people's emotions and empathy, looking at people's facial expressions. You can't do that with masks. But
you also can't do that if the only people you see every day are your parents.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that too. So I was thinking more back about adults and thinking about our parents and our grandparents. And so in thinking, like, what have we been through that's anything close to coronavirus? I thought, what about World War II? Some of our parents may have lived through
I remember it like it was yesterday.
Or some of our grandparents definitely lived through World War II. And then their parents, so your great-grandparents, likely lived through World War I. And that wasn't just 4 to 6 months of media coverage or 18 months of people wearing masks. That was the greater world as you knew it was at war.
Well, even with Vietnam, that's more recent, more likely for people to have experienced it, because at this point, if you were even alive in World War II, you're old.
So but
Vietnam, like, people could still get drafted in Vietnam.
But back to mental health. Right.
Yeah.
And we look at the older people as somehow having a better mental health. Now, the difference, because I noted Vietnam, and Vietnam is more along the lines of where we are today in dealing with these issues. So back in those times when the world was at war, the U.S. was at war, we were united as a country. We were sacrificing for the country.
Vietnam, we weren't united as a country.
And that was my one issue with Vietnam, is that Vietnam is kind of closer to the struggle that we're going through today, where there was support for it and people that were also very much against it, and then fighting with each other. So
more recently, you can compare Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, when we went to war in Afghanistan, virtually nobody was opposed to that. But when we went to war in Iraq, there was a much bigger debate.
Yeah. So really what I think is going to happen, especially when it comes to childhood development, is we're going to have a lot of issues with these interpersonal skills. Think about sharing. Sharing is something that in our generation was very much reinforced.
Yeah, it was pushed pretty hard.
Now it is explicitly forbidden.
Yeah, but not because sharing is bad. It's because in the current environment, sharing is perceived by some to be dangerous because of coronavirus.
Let me ask you a question though, because you want to teach somebody why they can't share. Imagine trying to explain to a 2-year-old to a level where they could comprehend why they must be wearing a mask.
I wouldn't even bother. I would say, this is going to be fun. You can put this on, look at the pretty colors.
It doesn't work though, because 4 seconds later they're ripping it off their face and chewing on it.
Yeah, you make up some lie about like how they have to do it, and like if they don't, then like some trumped up charges or whatever will apply. You'd be like, if you don't, if you take off the mask, the boogeyman's gonna get you or something. You just use fear tactics.
But that only holds up so long because you got to be wearing it so fucking always. And imagine the idea of cementing that the air is deadly into the mind of a toddler, and the implications that that's going to have playing out with, you know, whether anxiety issues as they get older, or OCD, which technically is an anxiety issue. Like that's a very difficult place to be. And just think about the repercussions of trying to explain to a 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old the air is deadly, and if you breathe the air, you can kill your grandma.
I don't think that's. Please don't become a parent.
So but obviously you wouldn't explain it at that level, but you know, really that's kind of the ultimate level in trying to explain it, and you don't want to have to take it there, but that's kind of the reality of the situation, and then you have to dumb it down and
let's be real. Like even before coronavirus, kids have just been the vectors of disease.
Possibly true, or at least the flu. At least
I have never been as sick in my life as some of the times when I was teaching.
You know, I ride the subway system in the city, so that's always worked pretty well for me. That I'm touching things and breathing people's air, and people are coughing and feigning and farting and shit.
Yeah, but again, if you're at a school, you're in there for like 6 or 7 hours, whereas if you're in the subway, maybe for the like in an entire day, you're in it for an hour and a half.
But yeah, I think childhood implications, mental health, social, basically social repercussions are going to be big. I think they're going to be really big, because if you're, you know, 7, 8, 9 years old, well, you might be able to have a reasonable conversation with an adult and appear to be a human who can interact in society and have an understanding of things. 2 years of not being exposed to strangers, not being able to see people's expressions, things along those lines are going to have an impact as you get older. Because, you know, at 8 years old, 2 years is a quarter of your life, and really you weren't that aware for the first 2 or 3 years of what your surroundings were. So
it's almost like half your life.
It's almost like a third to a half of your life that the world isn't normal. So we know as adults that, you know, we'll get through this, and yeah, shit'll be fucked up a little bit, but like it'll be closer to normal. So,
well, and we also intuitively know that at some point coronavirus is going to go away, and then life will return pretty much to the way it was before, with a couple small exceptions. But it's really hard to explain that to a kid, because their reference point for what normal life was extremely small, so they don't have that much certainty about it, and they also have seen things be weird for close to half their life. So it's going to be really hard to say, like, no, don't worry, it's not going to be like this forever. Their response is going to be like, well, it's been like this forever for my entire life.
Yeah, forever, as far as you can comprehend and remember. So I want to get into a bit more of the adult mental health aspect of things. And, you know, before, just so I don't forget to talk about this.
You want to hit some of the comments real quick, see if there's anything we need to address?
Well, you want to read through them? I have no idea what's going on. I see something from Debbie Ferry, something else from Elizabeth, but we gotta scroll through these comments and catch up. What do we miss?
So Robin was talking about how New York City actually created a pilot program with mental health counselors in all New York City schools. So think about like when we were in school. Was there anyone we could go and talk to for like our mental health problems?
Well,
Like there was like one school counselor that made like really
but
nobody.
But they don't teach mental. Yeah, nobody went to them. If anything, they were assigned, from a teacher through the parents saying, "Hey, this kid's got some issues."
Yeah, but like nobody, none of the kids would be like, "I want to go talk to such and such a counselor." It was like almost like a punishment.
I was introduced to the guidance counselor at a young age, and spent a lot of time in with the guidance counselor. But I was one of very few students.
And I was forcibly placed in the counselor's office more than once when I was in elementary school.
Yeah, so you and I maybe more than most, but
how many of our think about any of our friends?
No, exactly, and
like you and I were probably the only ones of the people that we hung out with.
And I would actually of everybody we knew in elementary school, middle school, and high school. I don't really know anybody else that spent any time with adult counselors, and there's no aspect of the core curriculum that teaches mental health. Maybe health classes now in between sex ed and discouraging kids from using drugs, maybe addressing some mental health stuff. But when it comes to science or maths or
you just made me think. So the health class that we took in high school, do you remember us talking about mental health at all?
That's why I said maybe now. Maybe
because I remember it was like two things. It was drugs and sex ed.
Yeah, that's all I can think of. So maybe
a little bit about nutrition.
Yes, but eat as much bread as you can. Stay away from candy. Like bread and candy are actually calorically very similar, but that's the basis of the American diet is rice and bread, and pasta. So real quick, I want to talk slightly more about adult mental health. And I don't know if you caught some of that video that I shared with you beforehand, but it's kind of a mental health thing I subscribe to on YouTube. I can't think of the name, but I'll look it up and try to share the link. But right off the bat, they said when you're in the grips of mental illness, you are no longer capable of thinking. And I'm paraphrasing that. But I think when you're kind of going through an episode, whether it's depression or anxiety, despite your fervid focus, your thoughts are not rational and you can't trust even yourself. And I think we have a bit of that going on now with the high anxiety coronavirus club that's helping us perpetuate the media coverage of coronavirus. But in general, even before coronavirus, we had lots of people going through depression, high anxiety, super burnout from work. And I don't know what allowed that to manifest, because if you look at the generation above us, they look down at us and say, we were working harder than you and somehow you're getting burned out.
Well, two things there. First, I don't actually agree with the older generation saying that they are working harder than us. I would say they were working differently than us. The second is the older generation was never exposed to social media.
Well, yeah, so social media. So real quick, I just want to finish this thought though, that when you're not mentally straight, your mind starts to look at reality through a distorted lens, and the brain is also super complex. And typically what happens is we hyper focus on things that may not be a true reflection of reality. Just like the girl that you were dating who thought people were talking about her and she had some kind of severe paranoia. It wasn't
her fault.
No, but she wasn't looking at reality through a clear lens. There was
she wasn't capable of it,
and also unaware that it was when you're in mental illness, you can't even realize that you can't trust yourself and that you're not capable of thinking straight. Your mind is distorted, and unfortunately, as much self-awareness as you're able to employ, it often isn't enough.
Well, the problem there is, like, if you think about it, the only thing that we know that we can trust in our lives is our own thoughts. Those are the only thing that's ever been consistent in our entire lives. And so when your own thoughts start to betray you, you don't have the resources or the ability to be able to question that, because that's the only thing that you've ever had to base yourself on. So it's really hard to be able to recognize that
your speedometer is off, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that your point of reference can no longer be a trusted point of reference. So, I know a few years ago you were going through a pretty heavy bout of depression. I've been through some pretty decent bouts with depression, and I know it can be crippling.
So here's one thing. I think I've only really had like one period of time where I was severely depressed, and like thankfully it's not chronic for me, but it made me realize what people who have depression go through. And it's not just like, when you think depression, you think it was like someone just being like sad or weepy or whatever, and that's not what it is. It's the ability to get motivation to do things just completely evaporates, and making any kind of achievement whatsoever just become like, think about it when you're at the gym and you're on your 10th rep of the third set and pushing up that bar, it's taking everything you can do. So now imagine that feeling, but it's getting out of bed and putting on clothes and going to work, or going to the store to buy food or whatever, or just anything that requires something of you seems like a hill you can't climb.
That's a good way to describe it. That's very well stated.
And it made me have a lot of sympathy for people who have a condition where they feel like that every single day.
Yeah, and it's very tough to break that cycle. And with the advent of social media, not even the advent, with we're certainly beyond the advent of social media, but social media certainly doesn't help. It doesn't help people relax. And the thing about social media also is that you have no control over what you're exposed to.
For anxiety, I've never really had anxiety, but I've been around a lot of people who do. And one of the best descriptions I heard about anxiety disorders is, you know how when you're in a video game, like, and you're about to like get attacked, or you're in a boss fight or something like that, like the action music is playing.
Yeah.
So anxiety disorder is like that action music playing, but you're in the store.
Yeah, it's like your heart rate's going double what it needs to be, and it shouldn't. So
like it's the action music is playing. Something must be wrong. I need to be in a heightened sense of awareness, and all you're doing is just wringing out your groceries.
So I want to just discuss a couple things that people can do.
So hold on, I want to hit the comments real quick, because Elizabeth says in school they don't talk or teach about mental health because they would have to, and this society exists. Every day those who suffer from it find it difficult to live in this society. And then she also says, like, the way I describe depression works, but every depression is different, and that's true. I'm just like, for people that haven't experienced it, I'm trying to give them an idea as to what it's like to go through, in terms of the way that ordinary behaviors that you don't think twice about, for someone who's like clinically depressed, is like that 10th rep.
It's if you haven't been through depression, it's really easy to critique someone's actions when they're depressed and say, "Oh, well, you just got to get out of bed and take a shower and go for a little jog." But it's each of those things is a week's worth of effort just to get started, and it's almost weird. It's like your motivation is actually working against you. It's like this negative force.
Well, and it also is self-reinforcing, where when you, like, the things that you need to do to get out of depression are the hardest things to do while you're depressed.
Very true. So let's talk about some ways to build mental health. build mental health. So we're not talking about digging your way out of depression, although these things can help if you have anxiety or have depression or you have some of these mental health disorders. But
We should probably add that neither of us are mental health counselors. So if you guys really do have needs or help or whatever, you should find someone that's a professional.
yeah, and my last note on here is you may need professional help. So, but first and foremost, take care of your physical health and well-being. So having a good diet and employing some exercise is both preventative and corrective. So it will help you keep your mental health. What's the word I'm looking for? Acute. And if you are feeling depressed or anxious, a little jog or a brisk walk or getting out, getting some fresh air, and then keeping your diet clean. Think about how you feel after you eat a salad versus how you feel after you eat Chinese food. Simply put, it's better for your mental health as well as your physical health. Learn some techniques to deal with stress. So learn some coping mechanisms. You can just Google coping mechanisms for stress, and whether that's breathing exercises or counting to 10 or meditating.
Step outside and take a 2-minute walk.
Yeah, I do that. Well, I haven't done it lately, probably because I'm crazy anxious and overwhelmed. But very often when I get really pissed in the office, like I have a deal falling apart or somebody's pissed at me or one thing or another, I'll go for a little walk around the block or do a couple of block walk or just get out of the office. Actually, no, I do it recently. I've done it recently, and just getting out and getting some fresh air, getting yourself in a physically different place gives you some additional perspective. That's always good. Set realistic and reachable goals. So especially when you're coming out of depression, those goals may not be very grandiose goals. They may be very, very small, like take a shower today, put on clean clothes, iron my clothes for the day. They may be, now all three or four of those things might sound like something big, but one small thing helps. And if you're not in bad mental health, doing those things will help you keep your mental health. Taking care of yourself, improving yourself will be good for your mental health.
The important thing is to also not beat yourself up if you don't achieve the goals that you set, because then that'll set you back.
That's next on my list after get adequate sleep is not to be too hard on yourself. So, but yeah, getting adequate sleep, very, very important. Gives you some clarity of mind. And a lot of times when you're depressed or anxious or stressed, sleep is tough. So that may, mean that you spend time reading before you go to sleep. You don't drink caffeine late in the day, things like that. Anything you can do to help you sleep. And then I have listen to less news. So you don't want to have the news on all the time. A lot of mornings I wake up finding myself in a bad mood because I'm listening to the news.
Can I add in less social media exposure?
Well, that's next. Social media, like I was saying a minute ago, you have no control over what you're exposed to. There's not super often, but on occasion, I'll come home, I'll get myself a drink, sit back on a nice armchair, throw my feet up, open social media app. 25 minutes goes by, and I am not relaxed at all because I'm just like super engaged. If you want to relax, listen to some music. Watch a movie that maybe you've already seen before and know what to expect. But with social media, you never know what's around the corner of the next swipe, and what you see affects you on a psychological and subconscious level, and that affects your mental health. And then a couple of things to take on a regular basis: vitamin D, always good. Omega-3, like a fish oil, always good for your state of mind. Ashwagandha, I like a little ashwagandha on a pretty regular basis.
Now you're just making up words.
No, I take ashwagandha every day for mental health. I got a bunch of good vitamins I'm on. I'll have to share that some episode. Robin says vibrant.org is a website for New Yorkers, and they can access free counseling and resources. vibrant.org, Vibrant. Anything else you want to add before we sign off today, James?
No, we've hit everything.
All right, cool. I like that episode. I think this was a good one. So if you guys have mental health issues, always good to seek professional help. If you're feeling suicidal, call the suicide hotline. But thank you guys for listening. Cheers to all of you. And we'll see you guys next time. This has been a fun episode 153. James, thank you. Rosh, thank you for managing the back end and feeding us everybody's comment. And for those
good comments today for everyone who was listening
and watching. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you guys next time. Yo, that concludes this podcast. Thank you guys for listening. If you made it this far, you better be a subscriber. If you're not, please subscribe. If you got beef with us, throw it in the comments. I'd love to hear. But on the real, I want to share with you guys the phone number for suicide hotline. If you got this far and you're not feeling that great in the head, you got to talk to somebody. Suicide is a terrible thing, and the phone number to call is 800-273-8255. That's a suicide hotline, 800-273-8255. Yes, I am reading it off the screen over here. Excuse my eye line. But I hope you got something out of this episode. And if we missed anything, please share it in the comments. Don't forget any interaction with this podcast, whether it's on the audio podcast, you throw me a quick 5 stars, or in the video podcast, you give me a thumbs up and a comment and share. That helps. So thank you guys. Appreciate you being here for me. It's a good outlet that I have, and I'm thankful that you guys are here to listen. And I'll see you guys next time. Adios.
I like PBR. I just got priced out of it.